Last episode, we heard from Canadians who discovered their names and photos on Canary Mission, a website that blacklists students and academics for supporting Palestinian rights. Some were harassed online.
During and following the encampment after being listed on Canary Mission was just a wave of hateful and threatening messages online.
At work.
So they started posting on this Facebook page of my organization, the organization I worked for, and they were like, how do you have this person working for you? How is she working with immigrants when she's anti-Semitic, when she's racist, when she's this, when she's that?
And at the airport.
When I approached the border again, I was automatically flagged by the Department of Homeland Security, automatically, for secondary detention.
But we didn't answer the bigger question. Who runs Canary Mission? And how does a website with no public staff and no official headquarters have the power to disrupt so many lives based on thin claims of antisemitism? Hi, I'm Zara Kazema, and this is There's a List, an investigative podcast by Ricochet Media that digs into organizations surveilling and doxing pro-Palestine activists in Canada. One of the most notorious offenders is Canary Mission, a website that posts dossiers of Palestinian rights activists across North American campuses. You're listening to Episode 2, The Funders and the Frame, where I'm taking the liberty of building a little dossier for Canary Mission myself. Canary Mission first appeared in 2015. We know this because that's the year the domain was registered on the hosting platform GoDaddy. When you search the website's URL, the registrant's address is in Arizona. For a split second, I thought, wow, case closed. I imagined myself flying to Arizona, knocking on some random office door, and walking away with the scoop of the century. I was basically ready to hand myself an investigative journalism award. But then I read more. The address actually belonged to Domains by Proxy, a GoDaddy service that exists purely to hide its owners. In other words, it was a dead end. So I did what you probably would. Who runs Canary Mission? Enter. Turns out I'm far from the first person to go down this rabbit hole. Plenty of journalists have already been gathering the receipts of who runs and funds the website. One of the first hits I got was a YouTube clip from The Lobby, an Al Jazeera documentary series about pro-Israel campaigns in the US.
So Adam Milstein, he funds the Israel Project and he's funding the Canary Mission website.
Yeah, which is interesting because it makes it seem as though we're a part of it, but we're not.
That's Eric Gallagher. He used to work at the Israel Project, a US-based pro-Israel media advocacy group. In the clip, Eric is talking to Tony, an undercover Al Jazeera reporter posing as an intern. Eric names Adam Milstein as the funder of Canary Mission. So Adam Milstein funds the Israel Project and he's funding the Canary Mission website, Tony asks? Eric agrees. The Nation describes Milstein as a convicted felon and a close associate of the late multi-billionaire Israel supporter Sheldon Adelson. Adam Milstein. Bingo. A quick Google scan says he's an Israeli-American real estate investor and philanthropist. He served in the IDF and is now the co-founder of the Adam and Gila Milstein Family Foundation, which exists to, quote, strengthen the Jewish people, the state of Israel, and the US-Israel relationship. Now here's the thing. This Al Jazeera investigation happened around 2017, but the documentary never aired. Reporting suggests that Qatar, the Gulf state that owns Al Jazeera, worried about retaliation from the US. But the clips leaked anyways, and you can find them on YouTube. Later in the footage, Tony secretly records Milstein explaining his philosophy on dealing with anti-Israel activists.
Milstein told Tony how critics of Israel should be handled.
First of all, investigate who they are. What's their agenda? They're picking on the Jews because it's easy, because it's popular. We need to expose what they really are. And we need to expose the fact that they're everything we believe in.
Just in case you didn't catch that, Milstein says, critics of Israel should be investigated. Quote, we need to expose what they really are, and we need to expose the fact that they are anti-everything we believe in, he said. Okay, so that's one alleged multimillionaire funder. But if there's one, there's probably more. At least that's what I think the Forward thought when they started digging into Canary Mission in 2018. By combing through tax records, the publication connected Canary Mission to a registered Israeli nonprofit called Megamot Shalom, or Peace Trends. Whose tax records, you ask? The San Francisco-based Helen Diller Family Foundation's. Their tax document for 2016 earmarks a $100,000 donation to the Central Fund for Israel, and next to it, a note says, Canary Mission for Megamot Shalom. Alright, let's unpack all of that. Starting with the Diller Foundation. The Diller Foundation is owned by the Dillers, one of California's most wealthiest families. The foundation operates under the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, a powerhouse charity that granted and loaned over $33 million to organizations in Israel in 2024. Now, what is the Central Fund for Israel? It's a New York-based charity that transfers millions of dollars a year to various organizations in Israel, many of which have been connected to far-right groups and illegal settlements. So a charity in California sent money to another charity in New York to send to a nonprofit in Israel, which is somehow connected to Canary Mission. But why not send it directly? According to the Forward, it has to do with tax benefits. We'll get into that in a future episode. Okay, so we figured out where some of the money is coming from. But where exactly is it going, and who is this Megamot Shalom bombshell that's just entered the villa? After a bit of digging, I too found Megamot Shalom's corporate records. It's a registered nonprofit in Israel with 11 employees, and almost all of its budget, about $1 million American annually, comes from donations from abroad. Its mission? Quote, preserving and ensuring the national strength and image of the State of Israel. End quote. Sound familiar? We can't say for sure that Megamot Shalom actually owns Canary Mission. But what we do know is that the site is connected, somehow, to this Israeli nonprofit. And that connection, that's important. That means the trail we're following isn't just smoke. There's fire here. And now we're starting to see where it might be coming from. The corporate records of Megamot Shalom also list the names of directors and the board. The director, aka the man who signs the financial reports, is Jonathan Jack Ian Bash, a British citizen living in Jerusalem. He's also a software engineer and the director of a health machine company in the UK. I tried searching for the 4 other board member names, but got nothing. It was like they didn't exist online. Journalists investigating Canary Mission before me have uncovered information about previous board members, but these new names? Total ghosts. It feels deliberate. I was honestly about to give up when my last 2 brain cells reminded me to search for their names in Hebrew instead. And finally, results started popping up. In the first corner, we have Lior Probak. Lior is Megamot Shalom's attorney and legal advisor. He works at the law offices of Tel Aviv-based Dror Yezak & Co., which specializes in tax law. He was a staff sergeant in the IDF. Next up is Eli Goff-Geffen, Megamot Shalom's accountant. He also goes under the name Eli Vine and is based in Beit Shemesh, a city about 30 kilometers west of Jerusalem. We also have a man named Haggai Amaton, who sits on the company's audit committee. He's a director at a Jerusalem-based accounting firm, A. Yehudaoff & Co., where he specializes in auditing, you guessed it, NGOs. While looking into him, I stumbled across an article by a Palestinian journalist writing about the shooting of 2 close family friends. In the comments section, a Haggai Amaton left this chilling remark, quote, Arab culture is murderous. That's what Gaza and the murders among Israel's Arab citizens have in common. Instead of complaining, start learning to quit. We don't know for sure if it's the same Haggai Amaton. We reached out, but haven't heard back. I couldn't identify the 4th officer, but 4 out of 5 isn't too bad. Megamot Shalom also listed an address in Beit Shemesh, 5 Herzl Street. Remember, that's where the company's accountant is also based. So of course, I drop it into maps. Street View pulls up a sand yellow stone building, 3 floors, freestanding with antennas poking into the sky. The top floor has a big open window with white metal bars along the side. Below it, an orange and white sign in Hebrew says, for sale / for rent office units, 20 to 100 square meters. Above the entrance, a large white sign reads, Municipality of Beit Shemesh. It has two giant Israeli flags jutting out. The glass front door is propped open, like it's inviting me in. I wish I could just stroll into my screen, but luckily the Forward already sent a reporter there a few years ago, and they snapped a photo. What they found was a little anticlimactic. A padlocked metal door, two old chairs, and pigeon droppings everywhere. It didn't totally match what I was seeing on Google Maps, but the same sand yellow stone and dingy white metal bars were there. If it wasn't the same building, it was definitely close by, or maybe just on a different side of the structure. Since the Forward's initial findings, more funding sources have surfaced. In 2016, the Michael and Andrea Levin Family Foundation donated $50,000 to Megamont Shalom and told the Jewish Currents reporter in 2021 that the money was intended for Canary Mission. The Levin Foundation has also given $125,000 to Birthright Israel and $75,000 to Hillel chapters in Georgia and Pennsylvania. Hillel is a campus organization that inspires members to make an enduring commitment to Jewish life, learning, and Israel. More recently, Mother Jones identified the Nathan and Lydia Pesach Family Foundation, which donated $100,000 to Canary Mission in 2023. They also found that the Anne and Robert Fromer Charitable Foundation gave $20,000. And while this money keeps the online side of things running, Canary Mission has started to show up IRL. A few years ago, George Washington University held a student vote on whether to divest from Israel. In anticipation, two men in giant yellow canary costumes strutted through the lobby, turning the website's threat into a real-life spectacle. They accompanied flyers plastered around the building that read, "There are no secrets. We will know your vote, and we will act accordingly." The thought of faceless men spreading this kind of fear on campus gave me goosebumps. I couldn't stop thinking about how Amal had the same worries.
So it got to a point where I was scared to get on a TTC. I was scared to get on the subway because I was like, what if this Canary Mission was on actual people walking the streets, following me, knowing what I do because they knew where I worked.
Those costumes were a reference to the canary bird. You know the saying, canary in a coal mine? Its origins date back to the days when workers used to literally take a canary bird into the mines. If the bird became sick from smelling toxic gases, they knew danger was coming. In Canary Mission's world, that danger is antisemitism. Hey, it's me again. You're listening to There's a List, an investigative podcast from Ricochet Media. Reporting on stories like this is only possible because of listener support. Ricochet is an independent, non-profit newsroom. We don't have corporate support or billionaire backing, which means we can dig into powerful institutions and ask questions others won't. If you value in-depth reporting on how Palestinian voices in Canada are being targeted, and you want to see more independent journalism like this, please consider supporting us. Even a few dollars a month makes a difference. Head to ricochet.media/donate. That's ricochet.media/donate to become a monthly supporter today. So what is antisemitism?
Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews.
That's Deborah Lyons, Canada's former special envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. She previously served as Canada's ambassador to Israel. Despite not being Jewish herself, it was under her term that Canada adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA's, non-legally binding definition of anti-Semitism in 2019. It's worth noting that all of the organization's 35 member countries are European or former colonies. No countries in Asia, Africa, or South America, aside from Israel and Argentina, have signed on. To unpack Lyons and the IHRA definition, I'm speaking to Cheryl Nessel, a founding member of Independent Jewish Voices Canada. She holds a PhD in sociology from the University of Toronto, where she taught for many years.
And the problem with this definition, in a short sentence, is that the definition itself, which is just a few sentences, is really puzzling it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and it's not very useful.
The IHRA definition doesn't stop there. It comes with 11 examples of anti-Semitism, and 7 of them specifically mention Israel, conflating criticism of Israel or Zionism as anti-Semitic. Cheryl says that's where the problem gets worse. To her, anti-Semitism is more straightforward, and Israel doesn't factor into it.
Anti-Semitism is, hating Jews because they are Jews, or demeaning Jews because they are Jews.
Cheryl, who's also profiled on Canary Mission, says attacking Jews for being pro-Palestine is also anti-Semitic.
The idea that all Jews support what Israel does are anti-Semitic at their core, because they assume that all Jews are one thing. And actually Jewish institutions do that to pro-Palestine Jews, to demean their identity, to claim that they're not real Jews, etc. And the problem we have now is the conflation of anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism, or criticism of the Jewish state.
One of the major authors of the IHRA definition, Kenneth Stern, told PBS that it's upsetting to see it being used as a weapon against people protesting what Israel is doing. He previously urged the incoming Biden government to not adopt the definition.
A case that's really instructive is what happened in Germany when the IHRA definition was used to basically classify Jews who were opposing the war in Gaza, calling them anti-Semitic. And one of the things that a person commenting on it said, isn't it ironic that Germany has again decided what it means to be Jewish, what it means to have a Jewish position. And I don't want Congress deciding that here either, and I don't want administrations deciding that. I want them to be...
Cheryl says this pressure hits academics the hardest. In 2022, she spoke with dozens of Canadian scholars about suppression of speech and how adopting the IHRA definition more widely could make it even worse. Unsurprisingly, she found Palestinian scholars bearing most of the brunt.
The kinds of comments they make are absolutely heartbreaking. So if they weren't directly attacked by one of the pro-Israel organizations, the other side of that is that they self-censor. So people are very worried about the attacks, about being attacked, for fear of destroying their careers. And therefore they censor themselves, or they maybe talked about having pivoted from wanting to study Palestine to studying something else because they were told this will be the end of your career. I mean, there are many, 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 many examples.
She calls what's happening a chilly climate.
There's a chill around that whole area. So, this time we need that scholarship very badly to promote justice in Palestine and Israel. So if that's being suppressed, that's a very sad commentary on where academia is today.
The focus on conflating speech critical of Israel as anti-Semitism emerged in the early 70s, she said, as pro-Israel lobby groups used it as a strategy to protect Israel from criticism. In Canada, the Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs, which claims to be the representative of all Jews in Canada, is one of the most frequent lobbyists on Parliament Hill.
It's a strategy that is, embedded in the Israeli, what's called Hasbara, the industry of making, Israel look good. And it is, it's been pushed much, much harder at this point than it has before. So it's actually a really diabolical and brilliant strategy, because people really kind of glom onto it.
That, Cheryl says, is why the numbers on anti-Semitism look so high. This year, Statistics Canada said Jewish people faced more hate crimes than any other marginalized group in Canada. The government used the broad IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and ignored how other marginalized communities often underreport hate crimes because they don't have the same level of trust in the authorities.
So when you start doing that, what do these numbers even mean? At that point. So it's the evidence is so skewed, and then it gets taken up as the truth. It's really not dependable information. And that's a shame, because we need to know the reality of it and not some distorted picture.
Hearing that makes me wonder, what happens if you are accused of anti-Semitism? Suddenly, your reputation's on the line. Your career might be too. If it were me, I'd want a lawyer.
If I had $1 for every time somebody has accused me on social media or on some website or in the national media of being a supporter of terrorism or an anti-Semite, I'd be richer than Bill Gates.
That's Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri is a class action lawyer. For the last decade, most of his legal work has been defending Palestinian solidarity advocates on pro bono basis. Dimitri also previously ran for the leader of the Green Party and was the force behind its adoption of BDS. During this time, around 2016, Dimitri was in Israel for an unrelated case when he met a Palestinian lawyer with a devastating story. The lawyer's son had been killed by the IDF. The Israeli military said it was because the son had gotten into an argument with settlers. They also refused to return his body. Other families in East Jerusalem were facing similar situations, so the lawyer began negotiating on behalf of all of them. Israel eventually agreed to return his son, but under harsh circumstances. The burial had to happen within hours, and no autopsy would be allowed. The father refused. Not long after, as retaliation, the government demolished his home.
So when I heard this, I was so outraged that I started posting on social media about this. And one of the things that I did was I wrote a lengthy post on Facebook in which I condemned the Israeli government.
Dimitri acknowledged in his post that he did not know the full context, but Israeli authorities failed to show proof and committed a war crime by destroying the father's house.
So I published this. So B'nai B'rith goes apeshit.
B'nai B'rith is a major pro-Israel organization and charity in Canada.
They compile a dossier. That's what they called it, a dossier, where they took all my public statements about this, and they demand that Elizabeth May meets with them. And they tell Elizabeth May, they show her the dossier, and they tell her, you need to throw this guy to the shadow cabinet. And so Elizabeth May refuses to throw me out, and then they go public, and they start calling me a supporter of terrorism.
This goes on for months. Dimitri eventually gets fed up and sues B'nai B'rith for defamation. In return, B'nai B'rith Canada uses the anti-SLAPP motion, a legal mechanism designed to dismiss defamation lawsuits intended to silence people. They basically tell the judge that Dimitri is trying to silence them. The judge sides with B'nai B'rith Canada. Dimitri appeals. A new panel of judges in Ontario's Court of Appeal unanimously overturns B'nai B'rith Canada's motion. Dimitri wins. B'nai B'rith has to withdraw his statement and pay up. While all of this is happening, Canary Mission is having a field day with Dimitri's profile. But they stopped posting about him after his victory.
Because I think what happened was they said, oh shit, he might sue us for defamation. So, and they figured he hasn't sued us yet, so we'll just leave what we've already written about him, but we're not going to write anymore.
Dimitri also thinks seriously about suing Canary Mission for defamation. But there's a problem. No one really knows who's behind it. By the time journalists connect the dots to Megamat Shalom, the 2-year statute of limitation on defamation claims runs out. Even if Dimitri did file, the hurdles would have been steep. Hiring a lawyer abroad and going after a shadowy organization with no clear assets wasn't exactly a winning strategy.
A judgment entered against a corporation by a court is not enforceable against the shareholders of the corporation. It's called the shield, a corporate shield of liability. That's why people set up corporations, by the way, because they want to operate a business, but they don't want people to be able to get access to their personal assets. If there's a corporation behind Canary Mission, it probably has no assets. So you have this judgment against this corporation with no assets. You've just wasted a whole bunch of money.
If you're not necessarily after the money, nor is it an obstacle, Dimitri has other suggestions. You could sue for defamation if what they're saying is untrue, like Dimitri did. Alternatively, you could sue them for breaching the Privacy Act, a federal law that prohibits businesses from disclosing personal information without consent.
It includes things like information relating to the race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, age, or marital status of the individual, information relating to the education or the medical, criminal, or employment history of the individual, any identifying number, symbol, or other particular assigned to the individual, the address of the individual, the personal opinions or views of the individual.
If you don't want to do it yourself, you could go to Canada's Privacy Commissioner and file a complaint.
The government there's something called a Privacy Commissioner, okay, and they have the obligation to enforce that law. So you can sue personally in your own capacity, or the government could do it.
You could sue for distress.
Depending upon how distraught you are, how badly you are affected emotionally, it's a tort called the intentional infliction of emotional distress. And some young people in particular, they are very distressed by this, right? They would have a legitimate claim that that tort has been committed against them by Canary Mission.
And if you're really not concerned about winning money?
You could get a court to order whatever, whoever's hosting their website to take it down or to take down parts of it. You could do that, but it's going to cost a lot of money unless you find a lawyer who's willing to do it for free. And even then, there's still going to be costs associated with it. You're going to still incur thousands of dollars of disbursements, even if your lawyer is willing to do the work for free.
Lastly, you could go to the cops and say Canary Mission is criminally harassing me. But to do that, Dimitri says good luck.
The legal authorities, the law enforcement authorities in Canada are generally pro-Israel. So you're going to have to persuade them to do something, to bring charges, to bring an enforcement action.
Last year, for the first time, a Chicago woman tried to sue Canary Mission under Illinois' new Doxing Act. But the case was thrown out when the lawyers couldn't determine what kind of entity Canary Mission is or where it operates from. Now the legal team is searching for plaintiffs to launch a class action lawsuit. When we reached out to them to ask if they'd be able to represent Canadians, they said they're taking on Illinois residents only. Canary Mission may be the most well-known for labeling protesters and academics as terrorist sympathizers, but it's not alone. There's also Stop Antisemitism, a pro-Israel group that targets everyone from neo-Nazis to Greta Thunberg. Recently, it pushed the US Justice Department to investigate children's entertainer Miss Rachel. And of course, we can't forget Betar, a Zionist group with ties to Israel's far right. It says it keeps a deportation list of non-citizens, which it has handed to the US government. And then we have Honest Reporting, a pro-Israel watchdog with bases in the US, UK, and right here in Canada. It's infamous for targeting journalists. Ricochet reached out to Adam Milstein about funding Canary Mission as indicated in the Al Jazeera documentary. He denied it, but previous reporting suggests that Milstein's foundation does donate to pro-Israel groups on campus, including Students Supporting Israel and the Amcha Initiative. It also funds the media watchdog Camera. Canada's Privacy Commissioner's Office also responded. It told me that they oversee privacy laws like the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, which sets the rules for how companies collect and share personal information. But most nonprofits aren't covered unless they're doing commercial work. And when I asked them about Canary Mission specifically, they said they haven't received any complaints about it so far. As for the donors, when journalists reached out to the Diller Foundation about the funding of Canary Mission a few years ago, a press release from the Jewish Federation said that the Diller Foundation would stop funding the website. The press release can no longer be found on the Federation's website. The Foundation and the Federation did not respond to our request for comment. In 2021, Michael Levin from the Michael and Andrea Levin Family Foundation told the media that he stopped funding Canary Mission because he didn't think the grant reduced antisemitism to the extent he'd like. In April 2025, Levin told the New York Times that he had resumed his funding. The foundation did not respond to our request for comment. Cheryl Pysak, the wife of the Nathan and Lydia Pysak Family Foundation's treasurer, is a University of Pennsylvania trustee. The foundation has donated millions to Penn. Critics say that donating to academic institutions while also funding a site that destroys the lives of students is totally inappropriate. The foundation also regularly donates to Birthright Israel, the Republican Jewish Coalition, and the Friends of the Israel Defense Forces. The foundation and the university did not respond to our request for comment. Canary Mission donors Robert and Ann Fromer from the Ann and Robert Fromer Charitable Foundation have been trustees of a pro-Israel think tank called the Washington Institute of Near East Policy for decades. They did not respond to our request for comment. Canary Mission, Megamont Shalom, and its members and their workplaces, and B'nai B'rith Canada did not respond to requests for comment either. And that's where we'll leave things for this episode. Next time, we'll take a closer look at Honest Reporting Canada and hear from journalists who've been caught in its sites.
People weren't just criticizing my ability to do my job, they were criticizing the way that I look. They were criticizing my name. They were making sexually explicit comments because of my gender. There was racism, homophobia, transphobia, all intertwined, all mixed in with questioning my credibility, you know?
I mean, the whole point of these attacks is to try and silence you, right?
there is a list. This list, in Arabic, this list says we are in an operation. The operation against Israel started in the 7th of October. This is a Guardian list where every terrorist writes his name and every terrorist has his own shift guarding the people that were here.
There's a List is written and produced by me, Zara Kozema, and published by Ricochet Media. My editor is Andrea Houston. The executive producer is Ethan Cox. Jawad Al-Bidawi is the technical producer. Sarah Abdul made the gorgeous cover and episode art. This podcast has been possible through the generous support of Journalists for Human Rights. A huge thanks to Cheryl and Dimitri for speaking with me. If you want to hear more from Dimitri, you can check out his show Reason to Resist on YouTube. Thanks for listening and see you next time.